Once again, good morning
Good
to our
morning.
precious teacher, Gen Rinpoche, Tashi Delay. And good morning, Katrina, our very able translator. And welcome to everyone who's joining us online for these teachings on Kamalashila, Stages of the Path to Meditation. This morning, you can find the link for the prayers and recitations in the chat box. And if during the teachings you have some questions coming to mind for Geshe, you can write them in the chat box and we'll share them with Geshe. And so now we'll begin with our prayers.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one God to bliss, knower of the world, supreme God of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies, form supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, supreme God, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom, too well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offer to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Maybe just,
Ta Dixon.
no dollars. No. Oh, yeah. What they talk about? Yeah. In that regime, I'm a song, I sing, Serenity also talk back with certain doctrines, like that, me, from the La Church law. Oh, yeah. Don't be soda. Simje Tamjegi trip from Gengiroa. Can't say you and there couldn't Kibo. And Sanjay Chumden, that be Sanjay Kovanchi, Sinaka, Tobar Charge. They cheered with that top jeggy. And it can be swinging some Kuno Chanjugi said them the summer shoes.
So here, to begin with, we should think that there is a being who is able to accomplish the welfare of all beings, a Buddha who has removed all faults and attained all good qualities. And I will, by any means, attain this state of Buddhahood in order to be able to benefit sentient beings. And for that purpose, I'm going to listen to these teachings. So we should set a motivation like that.
Oh, yeah, Tatan chin Sartilia, and the share the Captilia. How don't the indent shake to a tongue top, but how don't the indent? And how don't you toss, but how don't the chili cabina? And in Yamu bet to a point of grace. And it don't a coy, don't a also chet of grace. Oh, Tina Shine, you see number about top to grace. Yamamba says when you get on by she number about top to grace. And she number about top to you and there's some zero. Take on you and then she bedelia. Samba person soba, Samba person soba. Yeah, certain persons of what to be in there or this. Or this Samba person soba. Samba person soba, certain persons soba. You and there said, and this is a sunny back up so. Tichi Punzo and then on danger, Milam to a certain to my boss. Sunny back of the certain persons soba in that took with us. Tene, Milan to a certain you the manager, get it in a Tim Da, Ranshin, that the chitin is certain time in using the Jora. Ranshinji Druban Jebatalia, Suches, Ranshinji Druba, Zembe Zebadipa, Mabasoya, Tongbanya Tosona, Muslim to talk about in their cousin, certain number was Shisha or Titobe and they were a shake door. How don't the Tony Doba Lado Kesona? Children persons talk about, oh yeah. Oh, Titobe and they were a stishi. How don't delay and then she does Shisha. Don't need to be how don't delay and then she or this. Don't you Madonna and it talk to Madas, don't you donna to W and then she talk to Grace sharing. That teacher and Shine the Ladoni the Shegdua. Shine Delia and Shine de some chichi to never de Shine one get to Grace. Oh, Shine Mana and the Mammy Lunga Bashinto, some temperature comes a chick toilet. Come to Chicatolia, temperature in the net of Mares, Shinelia, and then the carriers and a comjet community or the same temperature net of what Shinelia and the orders. Oh, this Shine combaltene, and the orders. And how don't combaltene? Oh, ne carsoda. Tongbanyla sobat dal Sebachene. And Shine digging your mong, you're a nigger part of the Mabasot of Matos, all the Mabasot of Maris. Tony Dober Ladon stores about Ladon Kesonani, and then goes Yamoto Sawanapa, Banto Bores, or tea and then a shake door. Oh, tea is a tinting matter. That one does she need a Ladon Nigade, go with the Esera. She needs a good show matter, Ladon Chibu show matters. She needs a book comes at Tony talk about Ladon the Marcon Barina, and it take in Carsoda. Chiriba de China, Tony to Combumardo. Shine come the Benyamon, the Bear Camping Yamon Juratos, Mabas, and there's some dead tambo, Niba, Somba, she was sitting at the temple top. tene ya drone songmi namgata namshita chiame siji setting mabuto yota o tezu topsun tarba toba yesam tene ya tengi liba chod ya ma je odu te taba to meba cheche o tende ndu tungen yangde sitina yongudwa shine chibu komne tunyi magum bayina ane ya tawa ngombe nga geshe taba mato bala topso samja nyamo chawa ne mabang bala panso samja sambashe tingji tempotre ani yangya ko alma nyawa yeda to sama ne soli kiwa de ngorto o ti sonja tuni kongu de se tindo so tenia bene garu do ne tuju de pronche o ta tenia ene do so nga jo shine de kombe kyuso de shegdoa shine da la don kombe kyuso de le tajira karicha gore ese de o tisha o de tenia trasa da kyuso shedo ran de shegdoa shine kyuso de le tura chi she so tumbe yuna neba serwa tumbe yuna neba che ene deba chunga chok sheba jawa mambo yonsu pa warwa chudum nambar tawa namdo mambo yonsu pa che wa tende yonde den demba ko gres che ti she so o tene tumbe yuna neba tele ya yonde nga yore se tele yonde nga kar kar yore se na tene ma ti che ka sura segula sopa rabdu ni la ta de ngame kom jange to komba senge korampa tongile taring buru cheche kagusim butin ne yorno o tinne du za ne ko seda kola sopa to ko ni lela bojil te ko yorno o ti segula sopa ni la o chi ko yorno o tene kyo mambo yan pasun do ne ti chenane kyo mambo pasun de ti chenane tengzile kyo chi yorno ne embaris ko do ne chudum da tawatun be draw sambudan dambas course tie ta ne embora tendel tebe ne songo yorno so so chibutane de mares ne embutan de tebe na draw tawatun ge chudum number ta ge tendel nyamdo roba yo ko grese o songo do ene chamola sobato tachembo menge ro ma ta tendel kechu kashe do ta to re shembo ko korana shebo do kale ka busiyo mare oh, dice, dati padonganzo charge. Ma,
Did you give that?
that what about the scena to do so?
No. So here, in terms of where we are at in the text, then we have gotten to describing the kind of qualities of insight, special insight, this wisdom realizing emptiness, in that this is able to actually remove our afflictive obscurations, and it can also remove the sufferings of samsara. It is through this wisdom realizing emptiness that we generate this kind of pure wisdom that is actually able to eliminate both of the obscurations, those afflictive obscurations and the obscurations to omniscience. And so in terms of a fourth quality of special insight, it is able to develop what we call like the excellent qualities of thought and ethics. This is particularly referring to ethical conduct as it is understood on the second ground. And this is described in Chandrakirti's entry to the middle way. And there's a verse that describes this kind of ethical conduct that is no longer grasping at signs. And so one is able to have this kind of excellent conduct based upon eliminating that sort of grasping at signs through the wisdom realizing emptiness. So those are some of the qualities of this special insight. And again, we had gone through the importance, the sort of qualities of serenity, this single pointed kind of concentration. If we don't have that kind of serenity, that single pointed focus, then we're sort of like a butter lamp in the wind. The flame of that butter lamp can't really give us any kind of clarity. So this quality of serenity is the ability to remain stably. And once we have that kind of stability, we can then investigate within that kind of serenity with insight in order to really eliminate from the roots all of our afflictions, all of our obscurations, and therefore all of our suffering. So we've seen how serenity alone is not sufficient to do this. It's only able to temporarily kind of of suppress those afflictions, manifest afflictions. But we need to have both serenity and insight in order to be able to get rid of our afflictions, to get out of samsara. And so we can, through the practice of serenity, attain these kinds of states of the form and formless realms, wherein we have gotten rid of those kinds of manifest afflictions of the desire realm. We can attain these really high states like endless space and endless consciousness and nothingness and so forth, all the way to the peak of samsara. But there's this danger of someone thinking with this kind of pride that, oh, I've attained liberation, when in actuality they are still within samsara and have the karma to fall back into the lower realms. So again, we need to meditate on emptiness, on this, develop this kind of insight in order to really liberate ourselves from samsara. And so again, what we have gone through is describing the kind of necessary prerequisites for serenity, like having a good place. This is all in the text. So to live in a conducive environment and so forth, to limit your desires and practice contentment, not being involved in too many activities, maintaining pure ethical conduct, and fully eliminating attachment and all other kinds of conceptual thoughts. And so we see these are the kinds of necessary conditions that we need to have in order to develop this kind of stability in meditation, if we're really going to work toward it. So the conducive environment is then described by having these characteristics, like providing easy access to food and clothing and so forth. And so again, if we're going to be developing serenity in this way, it's really important to be in like an isolated place where there's not too much activity, we don't have too many desires, but we also need to be able to get the things that we need, like food and clothing. And we also need to be with those that share similar views, that are holding similar ethical conduct. Particularly if we're in a really isolated place, it's not good to be totally alone, but rather to be with those kinds of people that are able to help one and have similar sorts of views. So we'd gone through the kind of prerequisites for developing serenity, and now turning to where we had left off, it gets into the prerequisites of developing insight.
Oh yeah. Oh, that didn't do some dinner. How don't get you so shake doa? Taina Shinegi, Combe Chuso to the Laudon, Combe Chusola and Dodon Doctor. Tadigalia, Laudonia, Mixeria, Chuso Carcoresana. Kibutambala Tembase. Laudon de Comjete, you Tombanilla Soba in a telechebachene, and a Yabuja Sembache Guyorno. Tindico Kibutambala Tembase. Mando Tenicasa, Mando Turba, Yonso Savas, Turba Mambuche Kurese, Sushi Semba Ocean, Turba Sambisha Amara, Nambelocena, Tambo Turba Coachera, Tesoso Samlatan, Soso Samlatan, or the Embedded Samcha, Social English, some June Sigra. Tenet Techela, or the one erasure, Yane Hando Comgo. Or this some younger Caresana. Taba Majanico Tambucha Haku Mato, Sanjay Songwina Carnage in the Turkore, turn the social attended to the Sigisam. Tahimbare some chasha you made at Nambelucena. They contain some social samtang with them. Tender songs or tender shares, so you contain some in dying ludi to send the social samtang with them. Tell you can carry doors, you bet you can carry, men like you and carry, to what in a degree so samata. What thing when they raise some Jung in Nishin Yabasur, some Junskra, Sosa Samlutana, and Ishina Hakorata. David Dambu Tijo, the Megasigi Sergimado, Koran Yeshaki or Mara. Then some Juns or the Reshas, Social Nishin Yabarwa. Some Jungi Midaba in Bada, Tunga in Bada, Dameba in Balasoba, some Junging Yeshina. The Resha some Tarasha and Rio Mara. Kawatonga Mebane. Takban Zimbata, and it's called the Ranshin to Zimbata, Tayaban Zimbala Soba, Comdachi de Ora, and the Shemba some remember Hako, some Jiko Yendo Mare. The meeting of the Panto Mabachagi or Marto. The Yana Yando Comgoyora. Comju Yongo at the Caresside. Mitaba in Bahakona, Tangziting Hanglebiora. Oh, Tina Sheni, Tunga in Bahakona. Quadi the ones in below the young Angangora. Tam never resha some nea, Tanjin in Lohengi, Nemana Combe on the Keungora. Tipa shuk chambo yore, between chode, Toma Memana com diora. The Niebo de Shine Saba Tuvi or Sanjay Tule Tenichi Tuverdo. The Yane Yando com the Mato, between chode members for Tobio Mara. Sheba Sambitanda Marua, Rangi Julia, between show, Tapan Zimba, Tawton Zimbala, so what Chizulo di Locacayuna, Tipa, Nyor, and the Zimbe Sasu Kuyara, or Tito del Community Kuyordo, or Dicicuna.
So here, the kind of prerequisites then that we need for special insight are described. That's where we are picking up in the text. And so we have described those kinds of prerequisites for developing serenity. And those are really common to the development of insight as well. But for special insight in particular, it says we need, well, what are the prerequisites of insight? They are relying on holy persons, seriously seeking extensive instruction and proper contemplation. So we need to rely upon someone who has engaged in investigation and analysis, has the kind of qualities that they have developed themselves. And then we need to seek out extensive instruction, hearing many teachings. But just hearing the teachings is not sufficient. We need to really reflect on these for ourselves, to contemplate in order to find certainty, to gain this kind of ascertainment that's really certain. And then we can go and meditate on those things and actually kind of effectuate change through meditation. But we can't do this without first hearing the teachings from someone else. And so we need to begin by seeking out extensive teachings. But at that point, it's really just at this level of we've heard it from someone else. And so we sort of accept, oh, they say this. And then we get into the point of reflection, of actually contemplating for ourselves. And we need to, as an individual, use our own reasoning and really think through this. Well, why is it like that? Why isn't it like that? What are the faults that it would be if it were that way or if it weren't that way? And so the kind of certainty that we gain from that kind of contemplation is really more powerful than the sort of level of just having heard something. But it's not sufficient to just know at that level that has arisen from our own contemplation. So again, just knowing these things is not able to really act against the powerful kind of wrong conceptions that we have habituated ourselves to since beginningless time. So grasping at things as permanent and grasping at a kind of self, grasping at samsara as pleasurable and so forth are things that we have been habituated to for lifetime after lifetime since beginningless time. And so just the knowledge that say, oh, I'm certain that things are impermanent is not able to remove our grasping at permanence, but rather it takes gaining that certainty and then meditating on it again and again in order to combat those kinds of wrong views that we have held on to for so long. So in our continuum, we have this strong grasping at permanence, grasping at a self, and it is only through first hearing the teachings about how things are impermanent and so forth, contemplating them, and then repeatedly meditating on them that we are able to finally undermine these wrong views that we have been habituated to for so many lifetimes.
Oh yeah. Chitnako Munju Rabtande, Labutande, Neko Turja Hakon and Divido. Midabja Hakon, Tina de Minduge Serasena, or Mindu Chichi do Mama do say Labsana Hakon and Disara, Yan the way Yan Yard, some Tangomara. Could be disorderly Totocha and take a yomato. Hakwa some good digdoa. That shirt it in the mato. Garadu Nambulo Langina, you think a lot of some Chicago. So Lord Langina, you had the combat seduction, Konga should be Kedayora. A tears on that team have sweat on dollar, so the Samuta hunting on the race any and the Comdiche Guyora. Shuni Sheba some with some with Yave. Sheba mentioned Yamso Longsum door. She said the Congo save carbonation matter, she Sheba some with the Madison door. Tangaradu Nambu, the shares on our dear Hakos, and Tagashasha. Tashan Kepando Mazur that to be penalty on Grimadoce. This is a Koyana Yando Summer down the water. This was a Sanjay Chumden Dege. Kello Dagam Kenam, the Sajeta session to Lebatalanga, Galan, Kuchim Songua. Shesun Cotillo Marito. But the social Samleton, so the social logic and social Hako Goyara. Sanjay Chumden Dege Kingo Kanga Kingo at the tea, Marson and Ganjo Samleton, social Hako at Chegoyana. Kelo Yena, Kelo Member Suina, Chile Tabachin Gashina, Dagji Songua. Secretary session. Jitebe said of Junior in a Shibut and the teacher, no subject, Jumada subject, subsistence, Dr. Chibudwa. Which the committee and got sometimes when Yamlicherwa. George Chimane Tuesday, but Joanna Tuesday, Tigan Donia, Yajetan Kuchirwa, Tino, not to you, Mato. But this was it, and they took this as a Dr. Social Shangura. Social Machina, Nishi Yigmato, on it, Reshasm. So some madam machine out in the Sigados and get it to Mato, Labia Wanja Yomaro, or the Re Mother Sachi Yomara, or the Pigeon loves at the Madras, Pigeon Social, Cardas and Kansi said the chair Mato, Yomato, the Egypt, so Samutan, but Yanayando, Comquia Tirate Orto. Oh, yeah, what is your
So generally, when it comes to, say, like manifest objects of knowledge, maybe just hearing something is able to give us the kind of understanding that we need. Like, oh, is there a person over there? And you can say, yeah, there's a person over there. And that completes the sort of level of understanding that we need. So when it comes to sort of manifest apparent things, maybe just hearing is a sufficient level to gain the kind of knowledge that we want. But here we're talking about identifying this kind of innate grasping at a self, innate grasping at permanence that we have been habituated to, familiarized with since beginningless time. And in order to counteract that, we need the kind of knowledge that is actually developed through contemplation and then meditation. It isn't just like, say, knowing things like blue and yellow and various colors and just like knowledge where hearing it once is enough to have knowledge of that. It's not beneficial to just hear the Buddha's teachings, but rather we have to take it to a deeper level. As the Buddha has said, bhikshus and scholars should examine my words in the way that a goldsmith tests gold by burning, cutting, and rubbing. Only then should my words be accepted, not out of respect for me. So when it comes to Dharma, when we are talking about Dharma, this is something where it isn't sufficient to just hear it and sort of accept it at that level, but rather one needs to strive to gain understanding through one's own individual reasoning. Even when it comes to certain worldly things, we need to investigate to make sure that we're right about something. We need to know that we're doing it in an unmistaken way. And so even so much more so when it comes to something like Dharma, that is about lifetime after lifetime, where we don't want to be mistaken about what we are doing or where we are going. And so here we need to know for ourselves. It's not enough for us to say, oh, well, it's said that it's like this, or it's probably like that because it says so in the texts. That's not sufficient. As the Buddha has said, we need to take the words that he has spoken and examine them for ourselves in order to gain the kind of understanding that makes a difference.
Chöji pen takwa di yinsi. Pen tak suni chö chö pa kuima che, chö sheya da mission da chö lu chö kuya da tindi cheba de, pen tak pa chok du juba resi, akshu di resi ngora. Tanda saya tonga di pen ju reji rokwa che na pen da towa de don. Yine dile jang, chö ki pa sheba da kuima cheba da tindi cheba de pen tak pa chok du juba yinsi ngora. Pen tok pa chö sida, susu pa pen tak na ya, 파조들 팬 토고로 봐. 팬 톡베 저저 로나 주로야스. 내가 코텐데 맨나 단도코 삼루를 줄줄 친제. 삼루단단 주어친 손에 뭐네 저셔버데 팬 토고로 봐. 디마도 코 저셔네 그저셔나 공개만 하신 때들도는 팬 토요 말도. 제가 팬딱 바디 쳐도 좀 쳐려고 마셔버데 예송거라. 팬 톡베 쳐도 팬 토마도데 가르스나 파조들 쳐게 Lolly assembly to Russian Sonang Madamada Yari Dotona, Tangone Cheshire the Pan Toba Soda. This was a Pajo de Samultan, Soso Yana and the Samultan, Toshi Majan, and assembly to Adu Marton, Yamana City Uredo. Oh, did you? Yeah.
So this is explained by the the earlier Kadampa Geshes as well, where they said that the sort of supreme benefit that we can give to others is explaining the Dharma and encouraging them in it. But as for the recipient of that, it's only really a benefit to them if they actually take those teachings and put them into practice. So if the recipient of our, say, explanations doesn't really effecate any sort of change, doesn't actually put those teachings into practice, then that's not really of benefit to them. So whether it benefits the recipient or not is really dependent on that person's own effort at understanding it, really putting that into practice.
Chendel Korale Shidi Togure, Nangmili Shidi Togure, Randa Joy and Gesula Pando Yungure. This is my but take into Nikiana Kioya, Kiwachima, the Kona Konduga Pene, Yayen Shio. Or this was at the Pentokwen and Pentokwen and the Chok to give a race on Quaditira. Yeah.
So here, then, when it comes to sort of the greatest benefit, again, when it comes to say giving someone Dharma explanations, if they actually take those into practice, this is the most beneficial kind of thing, not just in this life and for those that surround them, but in terms of lifetime after lifetime. So the real benefit of the Dharma comes from the practice of the recipient, of the one who has taken it into practice. That's how we benefit from the Dharma. So the supreme kind of benefit that we can give to others that's virtuous no matter what is, say, explaining the Dharma and so forth. But in terms of the one who receives it, the benefit really comes from their effectuating some kind of change through practice.
Oh, the Chita Chu in a Tawa, Pajotilici Pengiresam, Sanjay Sunshebe Chudi, Chelam Juguresam, taking Jurochin Rotuguresam Jeko, Seven Sambe Kunalan about Chu Sheko Yormato, Latin Sarajinico, Churches the Pazina, Mimartan, so Chudi Kelly Gengi Pa, Mimartan, so that she Samukoda. Sanjay Sunday, the church on Duzanko, Chidam, Sulpana, so the mother. Dili pemba de nge tendeke chochi ye to dal sugi omara ta ina ngaras ting sa tende de ro do mi mangaru ta na ni suk cher ndo ya soris ngara zo mi mangaru ta ya tenda marwa mi chigli pena pemba ro chamba da ni ji chanju samle samba sambu sung mi chil pen to ne pen to ma do mangbu jamni ngazu ma re ja kuna ni mi mangbu ko de se tambu ne tredu de jebje kapdi cha go re samle ni mi mangbu ko re samya Titantal Peresoriana, Madrid, or Sanjay Susodi, Pembashi Setupa, Pajo del Chipengri, some Tungele said that Chimada, Tende say to Cheshire or Mado, Mima Doeta, Tende pay to the Chicamara. Oh, yeah.
So when we give some kind of Dharma explanation to others, it should be done with a kind of motivation, a loving motivation of thinking how it will benefit the other person. That's the reason for giving any kind of instructions. So when one is teaching, it's not about, say, gathering a lot of people, trying to get more people to accept what you say or spread the Dharma or strengthen this particular kind of view, but really it's about benefiting another person, whether it's even just one person, through this motivation of love and compassion, of wanting to help them. That's really the fundamental reason for giving Dharma to others. It's not like trying to gather a bunch of people. I mean, when you are going to war, you try to get more and more people to sort of make preparations for that. That's not the kind of attitude that one should have in terms of explaining the Dharma. The whole reason is about creating a benefit for the other, even if it's just one person.
Oh, yeah, how don't get you so conscious, Nasra. Give Tambala Tembase, or give Tamba Kansa Cheberche, then you get to Tango Reserva. Mount Turba Yonso Chawas, there she showed with chick turba something, the turba Gachambuche or Resora, Taja Mambo Turbo, chick turn the teach of Chiche or Maris. Mount Tuba Yonsu Jawase, Sushi Sembase, Kibutambal Ten, Mambo Tur, and the Tuba de Shash and the Jigmarese, Sushi Semba, some June Dantini, Tene Yana Yandu Kombaku Dese, Sushi Semba also, or how don't tell ya, she said Nelu Teriordo. She said Nelu Turn, we need to Karina Tisha, and then I'm used to some time at that. We need to do Tumbo to Tariordo. Oh, the meeting by now, and I'm getting there some good him and what I attended it was some Kosheku or Tico. How don't come so she need to shit up the Kaki or no. We need to shit up the Kaki or a tit and Dalia, and then Kibutambala Temba, Mount Tuba, Sawa, Sushi Sembas. That Kibutambala Temba the country temperature until I Kibutamba Chitabula Temper Chashana, Kibutambala Temper Chas, Tensa Kibutamba the country Corasana. Mount Tubatas, Kibutamba Koraya, and the Mount Tubas Cordes, 6 hours, and it share 6 Cordes, Ninja than Dembata, 7 Kunalan, the Shandish Cordes from Gora, to the trainers and Champada 7 Kunalan, Sentita and Kyotan in the Mechido, Tondachi to shave or no, 7 Jordan Dembas. The Kyoa also, that's your share that in Delia, and it's Kyoa Squad, Chini and Gedi Combata Macumbata Chiesa, and Chitin Kamisho in a co, Kalicho in a certain base called Esora, what in little temple Esora. In a mount of Tuba, yeah, teach.
No. So then turning to, again, these prerequisites of insight, they are listed as 3 here. They are relying on holy persons, seriously seeking extensive instruction and proper contemplation. So here we need to seek out a kind of qualified teacher, one who has the proper sorts of qualities to be able to then give teachings to us. And then we need to seek out extensive instruction. So not just being satisfied with hearing a little bit of the teachings, but continue to seek out extensive learning and instruction. And then one needs to engage in proper contemplation, thinking about this again and again in order to understand the way that things actually are, sort of comparing the kind of understanding that we have gained through hearing with our normal way of thinking. Does this accord with the way that I normally see things? Is this the way that things actually are? And engage in that kind of contemplation again and again. And then in terms of what type of holy person should you rely upon, the person that one is relying upon should themselves have heard many teachings, have the ability themselves to explain them well, so who expresses him or herself clearly, and who is endowed with compassion and able to withstand hardship. So again, they should be well versed, having heard many teachings, be able to explain well to others, and be motivated by love and compassion, wanting to benefit others, such that even if difficulties arrive, even if there are challenges in terms of giving teachings, they are able to withstand hardship in trying to give others the Dharma.
Oh, yeah, that Mount Tuba Yonsu, the condition with us, Mount Tuba Yonsu, condition Chelku, Mount Tuba condition with us, and now some good. Oh, then can't jump there, you sort of yala, Jungi Bo, Nebe to the Sanjay Chumde, the Sumba Sura Biala Jungi Hora, Sura Mambu Yorba. Oh, Tezuna Liane, consider sort of Yala Jungi, Nebe to the Tower, Tula Cuba, Geshe Yeshe Thabkhe, Sanjay Chumde, the Sumba Sundula, Tangdun, the Native Mambu Yora. Tangdun said the Zankungu, Nezu than Tumba, and member song Shabatan Kabri Yungura. Till a Tangdun Sigora, Comba Shendo Tango Yora, Titan that in a Shikelangi your mother. The Comba the Sanjay something they do Tende somebody, Tende Kvechi to somebody mother, when your mother says a patrango yorno. The Travet and the Asa. Some then they sort of Yala Chungi Pos. Nebe to the Nedesana, Sumbana shit, Neba, no in the Tumba Kellen and Jingetile, Nebe to Sura, Sanjay Sumbana shit, Tandala Tara, Yuna, and in Nebe to Sura, Chida. Nebe Tonda. Travel Dance Sanjay Tende Song Yorde, Tinanshima, T. Combat de Shandal Trangor, Sanjay Cup to Tende Song, T. Tondal Song by the Maton, Tendon Mares Cheche, Travel Segura, Combat Shando Trango Asura, T. Combat Sumbanashima, Shandan Tende Shanda Tonda, Shekura Sura. Travel la kubat cheche so sanje tang de dang ye de karason ina de samal ya kushep che gode so o sanje de ngone member che song do asam ma kubat de che ma kap te ta te ya tu che te le de song kubat che cha yo no o tu so da kubat cheche shindo nye de so de samal tam je so so nye ti song kubat ta kare ti song kubat ta kare to sam shimba che Tedar Papa Comba Neba Jeva Lese, Dodi Condigi Capsu Song Shase. Pagbe Tam Deba Shindu Turbani, Ladongi, or Pagbe Tam Sanji Jumde de Sumbe Tam Deba Shindu Matuba Nesura, Tuba Mambo Mache, Soso Koya Kanga Shimbacha Wuto Tambo, Deba Shindu Matuba, Ladongi Kegans, and it Tongba Nila Soba. Tamela soba tazu kumyaga hakdong shirab ji cheba chiyaga tonda de rang she tuk mardo teja toba mambu maje phagbe tam toba shindo mangdo ma toba chi toba maje ba ina ne te ke gre so hakdong kumba she ka che do se tinile hakdong ne toba da samba le chunga tawa number de hakdong se de karesina che de te ro Tinile, Ladoni, Tebada, Sambale, Tawa number Tagbale, number Tagbe, Julia Chunga, Yinoshi Sonsos, Tambu Tebache, Tombanji Tebache, Tenisus Sambuta, or Tenita, coming Musum to Togwala Soba, Tendi Yongu, Tawa number Tagba, Julia Chunga, Yinoshi Sonsos, or Tichi.
So then as for the second kind of prerequisite, we have seeking extensive instruction. And so here it says then, what is meant by seriously seeking extensive instruction? This is to listen seriously with respect to the definitive and interpretable meaning of the 12 branches of the Buddha's teachings. So here, the 12 branches of the Buddha's teachings, there are many sort of varieties of the Buddha's teachings, different sort of categories within them, and one should listen to them in this way where one understands that there are some which are interpretable and some that are definitive. So there are teachings that were given by the Buddha that are in need of interpretation, that cannot be accepted just as it was said, but rather is explained for a particular reason. It's done with a kind of skill and means to bring a disciple to a particular understanding. And so we can't accept them just as they are, but rather need to understand the purpose for which they were taught like that. And there are other teachings that can be accepted as definitive, as describing sort of the situation as it is without needing that same kind of interpretation or leading to another meaning. So we should have respect for the Buddha's teachings, understanding that sometimes things are taught for a particular purpose, for a particular disciple, and therefore we shouldn't sort of dismiss things without recognizing that some teachings are in need of interpretation and others can be taken as definitive. And so here, as it says, the Unraveling the True Intention Arya Sutra says, not listening to superior beings' teachings as you wish is an obstacle to insight. So here, if we do not listen to the teachings of the Buddha, if we don't take those in, this is a great obstacle to being able to develop any kind of wisdom realizing emptiness, because we first need to hear the various teachings and then we're able to contemplate them. And finally, that leads to a direct realization through a kind of meditation that we are trying to develop. But if we don't first seek out those teachings, then we're not going to be able to develop insight.
Oh yeah, that Geshe Yeshe Thabkhe. Changde de ne de se do, ta ge ngan zu changde se de ngoy ne zu dan tumba ma sung ba che. Sung ba de ngoy ne zu dan tumba men ba che ro, mi tumba. Tele shan do te sung ba kong ba de res tang go ba tele. 장된 시 송반한 시 돈달 켈레는 징게들 녀줘서 소 당연 어머 tenju와다 텐데 네 아신다 공부들이 요래 가시르서나 단단바 네루 타르투 담바들 녀줘서 다 네루 타르투 담바들이야 녀정긴 도시거라 녀저 다 타르투 네루 테레 텔레 차요 말다 네루 타르투 디테레스 녀바서 녀줘서 장된스도 군좀 메다 동에 동 담mel에 서버 송바터서 아니 메다 바데 네루 타르투레 베스 녀바데 베스 마데 텔레 차요 요레세 어때 소자 장된스 텔레 차와 네루 샤 요레세레 장된스 녀저데 장된데 손수 요라 그래서 산제 좀 된데 소리 딩예고 가수라 개심분들에 아주 산제 좀 된데 소리 아니 산제 좀 된데 그거 내주다 메도 버송에 가르쳐 오래 코로나 캠방원에 연바 양다보다 짠짠 송산에 되게 봤으나 그봐 산제 좀 된데 소송에 돼 나라도 쉐바다 저 말도 산제 좀 된데 메리를 통해서 그 감드 가르도 삼바 가르도 콜 가르셔는 그 가르 고사래 티강가 킹게 와라 어때 킨도자 가셔리아네 다요르 베스는 다요르 다 기라게 속분날 땡게 다 딱바 템바 틀수 템보데 모디 바투도 쉐바나 싱가 수도 가라조 로렌지 나래 차보르 비시우주 나샤도 어때 요아르 다 송고요다 기마선에 요 마르스는 그다 다메르 케게 메르선 체달로에 냐가 요래 기회에서 요래 다 풍부간에 코코 번에 가사고 풍부간에 독대나 시리티 나로 된게 다 요래 다 세 송샤 요래 다 요바 송고도 가브리네 다 매바 송고요래 두장 가시서도 콜 다 매고 때나 드사리 공부데 하고는 야부 펜스를 소나 공부에는 캠베나네 다 매바 송고요래 가브리 간사 가시가 다 요메 드디 요래서나네 그 답답해는 다 딱바 틸수 싶지 요서섬 네마 다도 짐바 요바나시 단다 답답해 줘야래 다들 요 말에서나 내가 체달론데 다 깨게 매버라 다 매게 매래도 깨게 매버래도 섬 체달론에 냥가 요래 랑원에 좀바 요 말에 땡지 데버 좀와서 카가치네 시에나 코 고토에 지레기 요 말에 대인들상 장송이 요 말에 레자기 요 말에 다 요래 요 말에서도 산제 장미소 쇼요래 그 가르스를 치르바도 전화 산제 레잡도 요 말했어요라 레잡도 말어 가지르지네 레잡셔서 요든 말 칠다 랍도 레메제드 가르스는 코깝데 두자텔고 요레스나 메르소나 가르치네 괜찮아도 용병 말 내가 비우샤래 어디 인도상 코 장도당에도 만보 용고에도 뒤라 산제 좀 된데 송리야 지당 현다 이네 공에도 장에 셰바도 상만 대바이 temba ganga te temba ye temba jang song shamado me temba me song yora chinju su tinde samgudwa sanje chomde de su tinde member 당부 내 뒤뒤지 강갈 뒤뒤지 참말 뭐에 내 지는데 연유조 송산에 되게 봤으나 된되게 와 말해 뒤제 감다 삼반 매번 나서 맞아요 아래 뒤제 가시 빼 온보 싫어 넘보 자신부 가르셔나 시에나 고통배 판도 요새요 아래 가샬 링지 시에고 세요라 가샬 연유치 마도 마셔도 마도 자신부 콘도 맞춘 게 와도 어때 인도사 아니 기부 총을 기부 링기 기부 신비 쇼시아라 아니 상하를 sol에 담메다 요나 데와 티인데 나라족의 냠솔란데 소소소 가레 메바요나 티 냠솔란데 데르마도 산제 송샤바 상마 탐제데 냠솔란 강가 제고에요 말도 이나 딜라 마데베체요 말도 장도당게도 강송 바텔이야 그버체네 송고도와 송고에 그버체요 송고요도 야 아래
So here, then again, going to what it is when we talk about there being definitive and interpretable meaning. So here, again, this sutra, sorry, it says that insight arises from its cause, correct view, which in turn arises from listening and contemplation. So when it comes to initially listening to the various teachings of the Buddha, there are these two categories of those that are definitive and those that are interpretable or require some kind of interpretation. So there are different sort of understandings of the different philosophical schools regarding what the definition of these two is. But according to the Prasangika Madhyamikas, they would say that anything that teaches ultimate reality and accords with ultimate reality would then be teachings that are definitive, that don't require any kind of interpretation. But when it comes to the Buddha's teachings regarding things that are conventional, things like impermanence and so forth, these are actually teachings that require interpretation because they're going to sort of get at the ultimate meaning, but not directly. One needs that sort of interpretation in order to get to that. And so here, one might have this kind of qualm like, well, it doesn't make sense that the Buddha would teach something that doesn't accord with reality. Doesn't the Buddha see everything in its actuality and see only the truth and also teach only the truth? Well, and while that is the case, we have to also understand that those who are listening to the teachings have various kinds of dispositions and needs and inclinations such that the Buddha teaches to those needs of beings. So some are unable to say, accept that there is no self right off the bat. There are those who are, say, like some non-Buddhist schools in particular, that if the Buddha were to teach them that there is no self and start with that, they could fall into this kind of nihilistic extreme where they think that there's nothingness. And so therefore the Buddha taught in certain scriptures that there is a self, whereas in others he taught that there is no self. And so this is kind of, we might want to see that as contradictory unless we actually have respect for the fact that some teachings of the Buddha are definitive and others require interpretation. So for example, there was a case where there were non-Buddhists asking the Buddha, is there a self? Is there not a self? And he actually just declined to answer, recognizing that either answer, either giving them, oh yes, there is a self, would allow them to just continue on in their same wrong views, but saying that there is no self could create that kind of falling into a nihilistic understanding. So all of the Buddha's teachings are true, but they have a purpose in terms of meeting the needs of those very disciples that encounter them. So there are various sort of characteristics and inclination of various beings. This is why we see teachings for the being of small scope and middling scope and great capacity. And then we see teachings on the secret mantrayana and so forth. So whatever it is that we are really inclined toward, that we have a disposition for, that's what we should take up and try to put into practice. But we should also see or really have respect for all of the teachings of the Buddha, recognizing the kind of purpose of definitive and interpretable teachings, and see that there is a reason, a purpose behind all of them.
Susu Semda also Chilo Yuva Tunguara, Semtambe Tawana, Chilu about said. Only Chutam the Rangwini Yuva Tunguara, as a low hand teacher, can get Tunguano. Colutang Beach to Chevet to Jet to Zulia, Rangwini Yuva Marada, Chilu Tandu Truba Yuva Marit and Desnogu Mara. Titavaran the Shakuran Samban Shishane. A team again in Medawada, Tungavata. Se Tame Ragbada to do some such a yora. Chutam de Rang, Chushanda Kanga Rangwini Yava, she returned to Yava Shishache, to do some such a what to Chile. Ta Colapa Becapso, Chutam de Rangwini Yava Mares on Gara, Rangshinki Yava Mares, Tantamba Yava Mares on Gara. Tindis Sonda, Ta Colotama, Dodo Condirva, a tickle yachine, Gundagi, the magic church. Kunta Shabangajupa, Lova Tawa Saming Getozo, don't number 2 Yoma Ranguni Yomare. Tim Mainge Sutra, Tiro, Rechase, and Dujek Chuto Kangata, Tombanita Tezo, Ranguni Tugurese, Kashe Ranguni Yomare, Kashe Ranguni Yoris Sungua. Sako Tuze Lolia, Kashe Semjam Betawa de Lumba Seniti, Pendoche Yongora, Kashe Koloparbati. Kasha Kolotama, Dujelis, some Julia, Madame Mambo and Gora, Madame Jigdana, Mildamida Yungutwa, 부춘주레지 이네 그 내중원에 시에네 그 고투에 요마도 티셰그 마르와 셰츠코라 하 고추지 셰그라 제한 들려하고 공개들 들려치고 셰그도와 어디나시 산지 좀된데 투세트 소리야 최지름 바 메다 송야지 그거 된데 시 송고요 어디실라 된디그래
So, in the Buddha's various teachings, we can see how he taught to various types of disciples and various types of sort of mental inclination or needs. In the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha didn't teach things like we see in, say, the mind-only view, where there are no external phenomena and things like that. But rather, the Buddha taught that there is external existence. He really taught that things are arisen from their own sides. Other than speaking about the selflessness of the person, all other phenomena he spoke of as being really truly established from their own side. And there was a kind of external existence. And this sort of teaching meets the needs of certain types of disciples. And then we get into the middle turning of the wheel of Dharma, wherein the Buddha speaks of there being no kind of existence from the side of any object, talking about the lack of any kind of inherent existence and so forth. This kind of teaching that was given in the middle turning is appropriate for certain other types of disciples who are inclined to a particular kind of understanding. And then we get to the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, including this Unraveling the True Intention Arya Sutra that speaks about the kinds of different types of phenomena, some that are established from their own side, compounded phenomena that although they don't exist externally, things like forms and sights and sounds and so forth are established from their own side. But things that we imputed phenomena like mental labels and so forth are not established from their own side, and made these kinds of distinctions in terms of the sort of reality of phenomena. And so this was a design intended to bring about greater benefit for disciples, because various followers of the teachings need these particular teachings. So it's like if we look at how in society we deal with children, and we teach them in a particular stages so that they're able to come to a proper understanding. We don't teach them something that's way higher than what they are able to understand. So too, the Buddha taught in a way to meet disciples where they were at in terms of their understanding and mental aptitude.
Oh yeah. That the new years Papa Kongbang and Jake Long Changdua. How ne Teba than somebody so a tower number tabe Julie Chong, he knows. Don't ban it talk about how don't tabu this or don't. Nick Tambu Teba Teba, social Samluta, some junior, Tini Yanni and the Comne. And you don't use some to talk about how don't stop out as a jiggy or don't. Oh, John Sonsha. Power Simiji Pushiba later. Teba than Dembani, Shirable. Teba than Dembani, Shiram John Gurso. Teba Mambo, Chebayina. Only Shiram Mambo Nigris, hello. Magic Mambo, Kitchen Mambo Nianche, Kagenda to the Mambo Tages, Mambo Niana, and Shirab Chef Dora. International Teba than Dembana, Teba Mambo than Dembane, Tobaya, whichever Shiram John Guros, and two Jungu Shirab Tigre. Tebalecho Shirab. Tene Sambatan is some Jungu Shirab Tigre. Tene Yane Ando Combalet and Comjungu Shirab Tigre. No. Teba than Dembane, Shiram John Guro. Shirab than Dembane, Yamu Rab the Shivan Juros. Shirab than Dembate, and Yamu Chon do there. Cares to the Koshijan Nejungone, the Shingiora. Tadun Mebala Sobata, and the same general needing Shaju Mebala Sobata, Roa, or the tongue and Shambata Niji Shaju Samba Sobata Mabu Shamba, to Sonson, to Pijana Sombanashi, Sambutanako, Yamuchon Dora, Samba Sara, Shega Chero, and then Mishiba Momba Nyon do your Shirab than Dambani, Yamumba, Rabu Shivan Jurus. Taba Mambo, Chana, Mambo Shingere. Mambo Sona, and then I'm used some non doing but Rawa, Contra Sabu Cheada, Shingirin Chata, Cheada, Trado Cheada, and then something other Shabu, some Titandalia le Nambasaya, the Tazun do the Sungora. Shirab Dembane, Yamu Rabdu Shivara. Shivara Duro Shekacha Dose. Susan, some what did you? Yeah.
So this same sutra, again, the Unraveling the True Intention Arya Sutra, says that insight arises from its cause, correct view, which in turn arises from listening and contemplation. So again, we need this kind of hearing and then the certainty that arises from our own contemplation, which leads us to develop the kind of insight arising from meditation. And then it turns to the questions of Narayana Arya Sutra, which says, through the experience of listening to teachings, you gain wisdom, and with wisdom, afflictions are thoroughly pacified. So here it is based upon our having heard something and then contemplating it, that we're able to develop wisdom, knowing the way that things actually are. And when we develop that kind of wisdom, we are able to then get rid of our afflictions in turn by contemplating the kind of way that things actually are. This expanding our understanding that comes from, again, first hearing many things, and then through that contemplating on all that we have learned leads us through repeated contemplation to develop the wisdom that arises through meditation. And this is what allows us to reduce and finally remove all of those kinds of mistaken attitudes like anger and jealousy and attachment and seeing ourselves as the most important, this really strong grasping at I. All of the kind of understanding that we develop is able to, with repeated familiarization, get rid of and reduce those kinds of afflictions that create our suffering.
Oh, yeah. That give it Ladon to so the Kibu Tambal Tempesco, Tisha, and the Mando Tebe also Savachiko, Tisha, Mando Tebe. That's Sushi Sembas, Sum Shaven, and the Sushi Sembadera. Sushi Semba the country situation answer. Sushi Semba Kanshana. Kan Ebe Dodita, Tave Tangin Dode, Nebe Tangin Dodita, Nedin Sumbanashi, Kelana, Jengin Doti to Simba, Nebe Tangin Dodita, Tave Tangin Dodes, Tangin Dodes, the combustion to Tango, Sumbanashi, Kelana, Mendiba, Sumbanashi, Kelana, Munesu, the Mitumba, Kayabe. Tave Tangin Dodilla Soba, Legbartella. Bebate ese, Sushi Sembas, o Tangdo Sanjay Song Shabate, Namsan Kamel, Sanjay Rani, now you are no. Kilondagam Kenam, the secretary session do Lebartala, Nayaka, Lawache, Kushime Sondoa, Sanjay Desongo Marne, Lava Kangani, Shua, the Chama Tambatambutan, Sungu Mara, near Lava Kangan Kiranto Taxi, Jigani Sage, and I taxi and attended to the Sigdoase. She said the message, thank you. They were thank you to that to have some juice or teach you to go tennis order. No, Tinduka soda. Chooses him by Tando and he did the Caristo in a totally like but tell a papa Tando in a Tando in Bashimbacha. Needed him by Shimbacha, or this Sunday did somebody covered the rich of somebody. When that's my reason, did somebody when that's a native race. O tradition but you would say Chishi Sembas Tando and he did in those also Kagache go at it. Tombani Dembando the Kare, Kunzu Temba Dembando the Kares or to Shimbacha would have some good Sushi Sembas. Sushi do young Dabachita or Shin Samuel Tangures, so Kang Hebet and to the Tamet and to the less of what like but tell them about this. Tezu kanga tena pabne tikare sombo tanda kare tikare soso pa tena pab gurwa dikare ditanda soe kare dos shembache gordo tena beba tesa tedare chaju semba tezo mena teni tezo meba che teba mambo chene komje tezo kanga tezo meba yabu shen suna ne yabu komto gurdo kombale te marwa tende meba che komna oda dinge komna digna digmana kare na sam ane tesum tena digmato ngeshenye bachkora tambososo te yang dangbare tingune reshasam ngeshenye ane komgu orda o tena beba te tedal chanju samba tesum mena kombala chidung ngebandi tesum mena komdu sane lo tebo che tade yang da bo sepe tachi tu tira kom de shogo to kom je ten ko ran kari mai tande se mana ani ya bo kom do ma to teda maina tesum je chama teda maina tesum sanity ndiyo na ndiyo na kashi sam ani lam kom bal ndure tina ani lam ge traba kone kondu ya tre de abu ma do teda maina tesum je changmun yugbe takbalan dukba takbalan dukba lam khata to simbe lamga ni som je ne so so longba je drogo na tan dinen drogo ya na dinen drogo na kawa drogo na ta ma shena ene ko ta je ni kan droto ma ro oti na shiri de so da ani du ne lam khata gi dor chimbe medar kando ya chi do nge bar mi ne ta je ne chiglbe kom je ti do de ta so to ma re so gora mo ya.
So then for the prerequisites of insight, again, we need a correct or a proper kind of teacher and to seek out extensive hearing, extensive learning. And then the third prerequisite is proper contemplation. So here, as it explains, what is meant by proper contemplation? It is properly establishing the definitive and interpretable sutras. So here, one needs to be able to properly distinguish between what is something that one can accept as it is, as teaching the ultimate reality directly, and something that is not suitable to be just accepted on face value, that it is taught for another purpose to lead to a particular intention. So again, as we have seen with this quotation about how the Buddha has said, bhikshus, you should examine my teachings like a goldsmith would gold by cutting and burnishing it and so forth. I'm not just accepting my words out of respect. Again, this is important that we use our own kind of reasoning and intellect in order to gain certainty. We don't just immediately accept what is taught to us. And really the basis of proper contemplation is being able to distinguish between that which is definitive and that which needs interpretation. So if we know this is something that can be accepted as it is, or this is something that is leading to another kind of intention, this is really critical for us to be able to engage in this proper kind of contemplation. And so again, this needs to be free of doubt. If we are in the throes of doubt, we can't really make any progress. We have to find certainty in order to then be able to engage in kind of meditation. So when bodhisattvas are free of doubt, they can meditate single-pointedly. Otherwise, if doubt and indecision beset them, they will be like a man at the crossroads, uncertain of which path to follow. So if we are like at a crossroads and we have 2 or 3 different paths that we could go, but we're not really sure which one we should take, that's like trying to meditate when we still have some kind of doubt. If we haven't really ascertained or gotten certainty about our understanding, then there's no way that we can proceed with our meditation. We're not really going to go anywhere. But proceeding from higher to higher and higher paths is really dependent upon using our own reasoning to establish certainty that then allows us to engage in meditation. Tanda kogi mindua? Here yakbo I think we just need to switch the battery in Geshe-la's microphone. His speech is getting a little hard for me to hear. Tanda kogidu.
Shilani Juso, Tambasian, Juso Chishedo. Passing between Mayin Badas, Any shadows with up and good reason. Nada shala soba pansi, mitimba mahimba dance, or mitimbe sala soba tezusa ju amarese. And this said it's Simba sawa. Kala de any mambusa ju amares, Simba. Tongbaka jinji shaku yoto, any comja to lela yungore, any day yungo to Utan at the Kangate yungora. Said Simba sawar chawose. Said the Petro Trojan the Tape, Gilele Badosa Jamar, Kaji Tomba Shawda, Chachi Tomba Shawda. Said Simba sawar chawos. Did I change Simba? Shineta Latongi, Tada Sagbate, Gombala Jubacho, that Shineta Laton Comege, Comse Sacheta, Tingi Choreta, or to the Saman Sasona, and that Shineta Laton Comgo Reson Gordo. Tambu Tingi to Yapo, to teach it Satan, Saya Tumer Kangayocha. Chanju Simba Shineta Latongi, so Tata Sagbate. Kiso Tata Sansone, and a Gombala Jubar Chawas. Tell a Nenjobe Combe to a Tomar Chawa, Chishieva, Tamje Yonso Tobar Chalas. That come to Toma Chida Koya to the Tama Tediche Estigura. Any Gasura. Shangji Chene, Taya Sema, Chapsan Sugar, Chapsan Drea to the Chin, Tadache. And it Taya Selman maybe Yeto Homachos. Tage Mambo, come to Tage Mambo, you know, any never your no Namsan Tichola. Ramamba something Russia Gra. Oh, try Selma Meba. You don't over Neso. Tag is you don't want us, so comjeta. The dream of Shandat and the energy, so now come good Nako. Chilone Trasham Bumeva come good or no. Oh, Tine. I know come to Tambukulo Choguresa. Kulo carried on the condensed Chogurasana. Such as so. Tagi is a nest, you are not Tagi. Simjan Tamje, Chanju, Nimbulan, Gober Chaos, Simjan Tamje, Kun say, you and then Kundenji Kansa. You pay Sambu, Samecha Tarchimba, Chambani Soba. Sheja Shebe, Shirab Tarchimba. Sambu and Shirab needed a Sambu and Shirab needed Tarchimba, Chagin, Simjan Tamje. Teachable at Tambura and the Tarchimba Core. Some Simjan Tamje. Sanjay Kovan Gobar Chati, Chetunga, Tamburani, Sanjay Kova Toba Chagi, some Kulun Chanjuk, some said and the teacher to me come Chagi, some Tangures on Gora. Oh, a target Simjan Tamja Chanju in Yambulan Gobar Chawose, Nyamdo, Samshe, draw Tata, Number Dube, Samba Change, draw Simjan Sama de Tungelia, Doyet and the Tungelia Tarbache and Dalia. Draw Tata, remember Dumbe, Samba change, Simja Tamja to get a Javarcha, teacher to any Sanjay Kovan Tovarcha, teacher to get any, come Jamni, talk by Tamburana, Chambada Niji, Tombanila Sobat, Autos Ranguli Kibachagi, some Gorado. Niji Chambu, Mondo Chelas, Chojuna should be Sanjay that Chanjusamba, Tamjala Yalange, Chargenes, Tambuso the Chacha or the Ungdoa. Namjunga Yala Dumba Secreto, Yala Dumba Saksan, the net to Yala Dumba Mendeta Cheba Pua Sedua. The Yala Tunde, Sosaya, the sources of Chambuyora, Love Chambusa to Yora, Tibachaya, the Tibachaya, the Abuchan to Yodo, Sakjan, Sakbata Changba, Kiawa Sakba, Sonam Sakba, and it's going to the party Tibachaya. Sarjan in Yangatsu tuition, Tunsongua, Chachawada, Namjum, Chachawada, Chujin Shakbadas, Choju Sanje, Tamje, Shusakawai, and Sosu Luka, Doma, but Tuja, Chach and Kushep in the Yende, Sanje, Kusun to you and then Jenny, Chachawada. Chaba Pia, Sosu Chaba, Shana, Meton, Shindo, the Carpina Pu, and the Tabu Sonda Masoda say, Zambulana, Chu Zangmata. Rawa, any Yamatan, Dawata, Reda, Yito, Nasela, Mamboyora, or Tezukanga, Pia, Mabacha. Tezo Soso Zambuling Missonza, Soso Telewan, Chayo Segura, Tesonza, Soso Zambuling Mira, Teson Zambuling Disache, The Kanga Soso one with Chachi or Soso Chibula de Kewon Made, or did to the Puna Penyoris, Chachi was the churches. Me Shakbase, there were Toma Mebane Sasha with Tibakaja Kachi. Chedile Tibakarisa and Misa Unit in Givacha. The Nikian Manam so Tibakarisa and Suzuki Tangi Marno. Miss Chebala so what Tibaception was shoved in the Sayira or Tizusama. And then Matibades and Tibol in Bushacha. Chacha the church Shabba da Sera. And Nikiwa Saba, Chacha the church Shabba, Jesu Yerasa, Sangeda, Chaju Sembada, Nisosu Kiwota, Yandu da Ranje. Simjanam Kawa country argument to pay out some Simbadan, Chudim, the Sabada, some Dana Soba, Kangal Chesu Ranch and Kawa love Simbutoguada. Kela Chesu Rancho, the Sosua, Narazan Michi, Chebache, Yabuche, Kawa Yabuche, and any Tado, and Yangayo no. The Tado may pay out and Draga question in the Satur and art in the Chetu show some Malam Jagana. Kawasa Bagi Chamabuchi. Peasant around Toguchara, Yintabani Chelsea Rachena. Oh, this was the Toma Musaguare. Chacha was the Church Shabba, the Chesuira, Shangi Kavala Chesuira. Shangi Yabuchi to know Chesuira, Tado Chiamere. Yende Yabuchang to know, the gas of Korean day, I wish I in the touching bush or some sada. Kawachi no, the cook you want in the lepsin to repair about some good law. And I do mission that Serenity, Baby, some corridor. Cotton Dick, Chichi, the Shandachi, Lingre. She observed the Shandachi, Mapabi Tabsichira, Mapab Kueka, Mara Suina, Yavuchuni, Avuchera, Yahuda, or did Chacha on the Church Shabba, the Chesuira. Gushin, and in Sanje, Sanje, San, 3 months on the shoot and the Mambu or no. Sanje Jumden, one of the Sanje, 3 months on the shoes on Mambo. Digital Church, Korean, Solar Danger, Quadminube, Memanandam Nido, never just or the 3 months or anything like catching that somewhat to call down, don't do the future. Chusora Nasa Sanjay Jumden, the Thunderbolt could collect Chamber, Simpson Tandala collect Yabere, that touching by Chamber. That shows no good. Zambuling in Melia, Shirap. Mabo yore, medo pema kashe chu na lo shange yore, kashe chu kan shange yore, kashe tele lagwa shange yore. Zambulingi melaya, ramjin tasung ge shira yingdu cha mabo yore. Chu masona ne shira na demba tozulia, ne kya shandu re, jimbe chu sura na sia shudoa. Ni sanje chu sungdoa. O de chacha wa de chu di shaba de chesu yera. Kulishin seteres. Chorchuna Suba San Kemataba, Chemasuni shooting at Tanjik, come Tameva Samtanguranga, Zambul Nichibu Marda, Zambul Nichibu Made, Jidan Tameva Kawaka, Tameva, Tozo San Janga Sanja Mambur, San Jen, Tanda Chemasuni shooting, Tozo Kangan doing the social labor Babasha, the Chosorona, Simjet and Dalia. Shuaban any shaggy shin out and shake some. Shaggy Cheson, some such and so Mabusagorno. Chacha was the church Shabba Chesuera. Gulchin, etc. So I is it. That's Sanja Mabus young Cheson, dying young Ellen Dana, Combatone, Gucci de Lieutenant Combatone, I'll do something to Congayordo. Or Tezulia, sure figure. Tanda Shurona, Gucci Bushurana, Chesoranas, and the Rangi, Lama Bena, Jarum Sidabu Kande, and Tezuya. Nyamdo Sale, Kujiring Bushurona, Samson Yamdo Samudan Church, Sanje, the combat sogging, Samsa, Congato, Tanda, Yuring Bushurona, Simjan Church, Shurona, Sijaswata Guardo. Chazawa, the Church Shabbat, Chesu, Kulsi, Solo as the young element of Swatera. Kulsi Swaya, and this was the Tanda Kaza Kazesa and Samba Sambutan, Gawa Kazesa and the Nas Simjan Tamjik Tunge, Kun say, you and then Kunden Kibu, Sanjay to go on to be George, some watch water. Kiwachon said, Doctor Tamjik always and do Chambon, the Pecation butter, Cousin Rosangado. Chanju Simbi Simbekewade, Kazaina, Kewe, Jebu de la Lonche, and I told you, Mabba Masha Peldro, son. Te kares de so nimere samlutan tag deba da mamba tu sun tu sabe ke wa samma tamje sanje ko ban to be jur che samwa che yora ta baris ni ke wa de per do yora jebu chimbata ne lonju chembo cha da saba komne su je be te da te yong ba te yora ne sanje du san thadu jebu sanje du tu yora ne pesum so ba lu pesum so ba lonju pesum so ba tu yora o te de janju semje simbe ke wa te jebu de la kaja longche ne ko zoye me ba pel do yose shushin tela tongbo de jebu lenji chine ni sa do re se amla so ba to lo ta ba de sin jebu jing do o ti so za jebu mi se pe an de tele pe sha de ti ke chen bu de chu tek ba ji yo na ya chu de la ka yo na ra ti thai jam zo na pha shwe na chu tek ba ji de thai jam zo na pha lo na an ko jam zo ma se ba do ke ba ma bol de yo re केबा जिगजी बदो देयो रा तो छुट्टी बदे ता शासन को कम दूरा परुजे कम दूर मदो तेग मार दो और थिनाशी ने संगे बे से दो ngो बे yin से संगे से दो ngो बे yin से दो संगे जे बदो को देयो रा और ते सोदा ते याला दो बदे से दो ता दे ले ला सोजा आर्गुमेंट मन बचस ता दे मन दो सान दूरा ओ ने छो जुने सो बे संगे दा चाजु से बे थमजला 양랑의 차체네서 상계다 자주 선배 구수 remola 소반 돈도샤 상계게 다 돈도고도 소소 돈이 샤게네 드리야네 초샴다 샨달이 위네 드르메바체 상계 좀된데 메바체 샨도샤나 론데세 대달라 진이지 최바다 다 최배된데지 상계고 구 리모티베네다 구치체 아니 주나 최된지제 최배제지제 숨거라 구순 독된게 땡서오라 te mena chip chune de do mena meba chena de shanda le chena de te da chine ji cheba da te ba chela se ro range tikba sha ne do ta da ge sunam la che su yi ran wa chela te shin do ho dire ya la tu ba che ani te shin do jambu te wala chi zu number namje ge kimuto 기존 제대 기존 배원의 생이 창시 되는 데그래 아마 지주 좀 나신게 기존 체식도 아까같이 맞아 시도 수도 도시 된대전에 소스카 대나 대전에 되는지 무지 기존 전에 깔래카고는 검제 파샤는 소스칼래카제 딜리섬 당시 되라 어 가셔된데 용거래 마니에제 검점내 야가된데 용거래 다들 담기시에 줬다 뭐지 tindu ko chona be chun dine sumba na shije kanga tena ni magu ya tindu yagu yordo tindu ya tebo mege ne te kale yena de membership tena ka te de tena de yordo tije chela ase ten shindu jambu dewala chizu namba na je kimutungam ten chilo de toje get the doors toys and doing the doors march and interesting good. No calling. Mendo. Don't you tell me? Oh, did it? Kimutu Chet around the Tatiba Duchishanana. Mandamata. Oh, yeah.
So here then, going back to the text, it says yogis should at all times avoid fish, meat, and so on, and so forth. It should eat with moderation and avoid foods that are not conducive to health. So here again, we've gone through the prerequisites of serenity and insight. And here then it sort of gives another general kind of recommendation in terms of like not say eating too much, wherein you're really heavy and sleepy all the time and so forth, that you should maybe even leave a part of your stomach empty for this sort of purpose. And so when we have then all of the conditions together to be able to, we've assembled all of the kinds of proper sort of prerequisites. It says, thus, bodhisattvas who have assembled all the prerequisites for serenity and insight should enter into meditation. And so here, this kind of describes getting into the kind of a proper sort of meditation practice. So it says, when meditating, the yogi should first complete all the preparatory practices. He should go to the toilet and in a pleasant location free of disturbing noise. He should think, I will deliver all sentient beings to the state of full awakening. So here, when we're like say getting up in the morning, we go wash ourselves up and do that kind of thing. And then we go to a place that is free of noise. Unfortunately, when there is really loud noise around or any noise at all, our mind kind of uncontrollably is going to go to that noise and pay attention to it. So we should ideally be in a pleasant location free of any kind of disturbing noise. And then we should set our motivation, thinking that I will deliver all sentient beings to the state of full awakening. And to be able to deliver all sentient beings to the state of full awakening, we ourselves need to become a Buddha. We need to attain this state which is free of all faults and has gained all good qualities. And so we should think that in order to do that, we need to develop all of these various qualities, the qualities of love and compassion and the wisdom realizing emptiness and so forth. And so for that purpose, we're sitting down here on the cushion to meditate. And so this then continues saying, then he should manifest great compassion, the thought wishing to liberate all sentient beings, and pay homage to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the 10 directions by touching the 5 limbs of his body to the ground. So here we get into then the kind of practice of what we sometimes call the 7-limbed prayer or the 7-limbed puja with a mandala offering, which is really the sort of condensation of our practices of accumulating merit and purifying our negativities. If we could condense down the essential points of those practices into something really succinct, it would be these 7 limbs. And so these kinds of practices actually are extremely powerful. We can accumulate a great deal of merit and really have a strong effect of purifying our negativities by engaging in the 7 limbs, which is prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, beseeching, and dedication. And so we begin here with a prostration. Again, we can make a physical prostration or be doing this by imagining all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the 10 directions, and first bowing down to them with this kind of prostration, and then making offerings. So we can make actual offerings, but again, we can do this kind of offering where we are offering everything within the world, everything that is unowned, everything that we collectively sort of own or are a part of in terms of this planet. We can offer the sun and the moon and so forth. And when we are doing this practice, we should place the image of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, such as a painting, in front of him or in some other place. He should make as many offerings and praises as he or she can. So we can have actual representations of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind there in front of us, or we can be doing this just by imagination. We don't have to actually have those kinds of representations in front of us. And so this, again, is then when we are doing these as sort of 7 limbs, the practices of making prostrations and making offerings and so forth are really powerful in terms of our accumulation of merit. And then we have the limb of confession. And so we recognize that since beginningless time, we have accumulated countless negativities, even really extreme, grave kind of negativities, like say killing another human. And so we don't remember all of those negative actions that we have committed, but we should sincerely try to reflect upon them and engage in the practice of purification, really generating a kind of regret and resolve not to engage in them in the future. And then we get to the practice of rejoicing. And so here we rejoice in all of the kinds of virtues of others, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, ordinary beings, hearers, solitary realizers. And this is something that is an extremely important practice. It's also very powerful in that sometimes we can get jealous. We look at other people acting in a kind of virtuous way, and we might have the inclination to think like, well, I want to beat them. I want to do more than them, or we sort of want to put others down. As opposed to that, we can gain like the same amount of merit if we have a genuine sense of rejoicing in the kind of positive actions of other sentient beings. So rather than trying to compete with others or put them down or feel jealous, this kind of practice uplifts both ourselves and others. And so then we have the branch of requesting, and requesting the teachings of the Buddha. We usually symbolize this in terms of offering a wheel, which is what Indra and Brahma and the other deities did when, after the Buddha had gained full enlightenment, he declined to teach right away. And these gods said to him, you know, disciples are sort of like lotuses. There are still some that are just barely coming out of the mud. There are others that are still in the water, and there are others that are fully blossoming above the surface. And so although disciples are at different stages, please give these teachings for the benefit of others. And so here we too should imagine not just the sort of Buddhas in our own world system, but there are countless world systems, and making this request to all those who are enlightened to teach and lead us as beings into that state of enlightenment. And then there is sort of beseeching, requesting that these holy beings remain for a long time. So this can be like those beings that are alive now, such as His Holiness, that they might have a long life, and so forth. So that's the sixth of these limbs. And then finally, as it's said in the King of Prayers, where we sort of wrap this up in the dedication, all of the merits that I have created through prostrating and offering and confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, all of these I dedicate toward perfect enlightenment. And so again, dedicating with the same kind of motivation to attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings, this is a very powerful dedication, and it brings benefit continuously. Again, as we have talked about, when we dedicate our merits to perfect enlightenment, that means that they aren't going to sort of exhaust themselves in the way that, like, if we have a glass of water and we dump it in the ocean, that water isn't going to go away. Whereas if we have just a drop of water over by itself, it can easily evaporate and be gone. When we talk about dedicating our merits toward perfect enlightenment for all, they result in these excellent kinds of qualities. They will result in the excellencies of our enlightened body and place and entourage and so forth. But even in the meantime, they bring about good results. So here, sort of like a mango tree in the way that it brings fruit every year, this is how, when we dedicate our merits, they continue to bring about fruit. And so again, we could do this in front of actual representations of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, or we can just imagine those. And then we should sit in the full lotus posture of Vairochana, or the half lotus posture on a comfortable cushion. So getting into the sort of posture, we can sit in the full Vajra position if that is comfortable. But if it's not comfortable, we're going to end up just contemplating how uncomfortable we are. That's the only thing that we can really think about. So we could sit in a way like we see Tara doing sometimes, a sort of half Vajra. There are some people that think they are best able to meditate kind of lying down. If you're not falling asleep, maybe that is what works better for you. But if one is sitting on a cushion, then in this kind of posture, the back of the cushion should be higher up than the front. That's a good start to that. And then we'll get a little bit more into the body position.
Oh, yeah. Kom gyabdu santa lu namna che tendense de gore se ti shekdo tungu ora na jamda kimudu chasan chena da kimudu che chena da tetan sherwa ene mi haja me haja ya menzum par na yetse mola tese mi di ya da tende chidan kom jangal ya mi har tange yore na gura de yigde de shaje ne til jangal tane 이게 진짜 장전단의 공개 연구를 했다. 단대 대급수 전제 공개 매서라 미야 땅지 공개 말에 미야 배좀내 마금내 야가 뭐 땅분에 미데 나지를 봤을 내고 찔이야. 말아준 디스테요라 미데 내고 찔 마타에 서럽체 되는 지겨래. 나지 통 잠시 두스테고요라. 미나지 밥세더라. 미 하자 미야 하자 menzumbas mitsum mates tambune na ise mortesis na guce mutede ene nikara lu haja mego haja ya mege war tambur sanla tamba na do shado lu de ma gugu che de gyo mare pe ya tawje chene ni kwe nya ga yo do na ju ni ni tu fa do sta ni kwe ya ta da chi ya so ya bu che de go do ma gugu ma chi pa ke ma chi lu changbu ya sang che de gu yo ra Ane hajaya mejewa sangla jamba nangdu shadadu simde na nanglo cho tamadu chilo kanji mashu tayamere. Tene chakba nyambara shala go meto memashi chochidu shakbar chadesa. Ne chakba nyebude, pungba nyebude ko kadul chegura, kyogyon dindere chochi nyeme kadul ba shagura, dire che shagura. Yes, pungbanyi dia kadu changbo share. Ane changbo shala kashi. Hajam shadi dukbar shawa so dira. Changbo shala chambana juma so tene chakba nyambar shala chakba nyidi nyambar shala danda kadu yabu shala. Go meto shi mema shi chochido meyawara shadi se. Nane chebar karsire chidu mayawar shade is nane chebar tambur shabar chaos ale ane di chakbanye kadu shashara ane me de meto me mashe cho chidu yawara shade nane yawara shade nane tewe bar tambur shagosha tandi di kadu nganzu te de sobu namju dinde se do chengma de chena o de dinde ste nagu ne ma sha ne te kadu chi lepchu che te sha ku yora nane dinde re chi se ta yu na gu de ne ro dinde du ste ne dinde je ne pe do ba le ra dinde che ne pe de ra dinde je te kadu lepchu re dinde chi ma ngo bo re sha ne te kadu le no dinde sha ko re sa re ya shi ta chi ji ma o ma cha no ti ke che ra dinde tene ka re na cho ji ri sha ko sha ne chi ba chang bu sha ko se ne ka re so da chu ya ta me bar sha ko ta so da so da de nam gi ne shi sha ne de re ko ya ze de ma chung ju ke che ma re sha ne re so da chu 타메 버샤고 지단에 신남균에 시장 저래 샤라세 제야 소통도 잡아 제때 소 담말이야 자고 요래 가르스 미범마 감에 체 샤샤 말에 미범 감도 망부도 스테나 하잖아 미범 감도라 제디야 자샤나 아니 미범 감기요 말을래라 어디 그저래 소다 조랑 버서 샤버서 제야 소통도 자로서 ene u china do joya ta u tan do sa ene u tene har sanam ju shuksam tene ma ta chera u tagwa tene ma ta u shukta bo de ma u ko ba chen se chamenya ba nga do sha dukshan de le na ene ha tang go do u chamanya ba tang go do tene ma ba se u ma ta ya de nam ju ne si lebo che tang go de se ra me tang ge chine ja me choro 대부 르르세 신지 주바서 코라랑 신지 좋아나 시샤고래서 수지 우 나도 뭐바다 시리 좋아들 우 나로 뭐베 줄어봐도 남주나 시시 고 르르세 담에버세 랑신기 좋아나 시샤고데 속주시라 자고 말이죠. 알아보냐. telha toma sungobada shir sunga tedar chawas telha toma rishi o tibado sulamne digdo.
So here then describing the sort of posture of Vairochana, the sevenfold posture of Vairochana, we can sit in either the full lotus or the half lotus position or whatever really is comfortable for us. And then it describes here the various sort of qualities of this posture, beginning with the eyes. So the eyes should not be too widely open nor too tightly closed. So there are those that like meditate by having the eyes wide open and say staring at something, some sort of visual image, it's possible to do some kind of meditation that way. But here, we're not talking about having any kind of visual object. The eyes shouldn't be open and staring at something, nor should they be totally closed, but rather they should sort of rest naturally at the tip of one's nose. That's kind of the ideal way for the eyes. And then it describes that the body should not be bent forward or backward. So we don't want to be kind of like hunched over in our meditation, nor would we want to be, say, leaning back where you might just fall asleep while we're trying to meditate, but rather the body should be straight. And so the body should be kept straight, and we should turn our attention inwards. So the shoulders should rest in their natural position. So we want to keep our shoulders sort of in line with one another. We shouldn't have like one higher or lower, sort of a crooked way, but kind of keep them in a natural sort of position and straight as well. And the head should not lean back, forward, or to either side. So again, sort of like with our posture, we shouldn't be leaning back too far or forward too far. It actually describes that the nose should be in line with the navel. So if we were to say like take a mala and take it down from our nose, it should be right in line with our navel, ideally, so that we're not like leaning our head way far back or sort of bending it forward too far. And the teeth and lips should rest in their natural state, with the tongue touching the upper palate. So this is really primarily about keeping our throat from getting dry. So when one like has the tongue fully down, there's a danger of getting a dry throat. So keeping the tongue sort of on the top of the palate should help with that. And then we get to the kind of breathing. Breathe very gently and softly without causing any noise, without laboring, and without unevenness. Inhale and exhale naturally, slowly, and unnoticeably. So we shouldn't really be like breathing really heavily or strongly in sort of a way that we're like making noises or something, but it should be a relaxed kind of natural breath as we go in and out. It shouldn't be sort of overly labored or unnaturally slow either, but rather sort of in accordance with our normal pace of breathing.
Oh yeah, that's ma shine shegdwa shine da shine migba shegdwa da shine gi tangbo ngo de shegdwa de tela thoma rishi shine tubar cha de se da lu namna chu ten de che ne chi da se kanga tra chin ta de kom ngi shi ja gu no tela thoma shine tubure se shine da la dong yig na ne tambo shine tugurwa shine ma tom ne la dong tu ye yo ma to thoma shine tubar cha de se 치료기 유라 넘버 영화 신내 세대 시스를 가르쳐서는 소소 검자에 맥바 가래나 디마도 치료를 영줘야 파 시와시고요도 셈상게 꾸데서 공군에 대검되면 치료 파 연기도는 야수고 대샤고도 양바도도 수고 대샤고도 치료기 유라야 아니 영화도 파 신내 난게 맥바들 세치도 내버들 신내서 다셔대 shine said. Tela Thomas shine tuba jade, Chirugi Yula number yawa shine, Rawa shine, Nene tine, Nando Mikbala Kundu, Rangi Nangi Jukbase, Rangi Komja Yukari, Sanja Kukumguna, Shambani Jimedaba, Tunga Totamela Sabakara Kumgina, Komja Yudi Kalia, Mikba, Chirugi Yula number yawa shine, Chidu, Rangi Nangi in Jukba. Teleatine, Luda Semle Kange Meba, Kadingone, Lusim Shinjansura, Lusinjang Tevesim, Sem Shinjang Tevesim, Shinjang Tevesim Becone, Mikbola Chidan, Dundu the Culture Sigua. Chidanga Zutanda Tama, Share Kanga, Kala Satan, the Kanga Sheswa, Kala Satan, that is a Yabo Rebayane, Come Devision Sobo, Tabu Gudechare. So what Tabu Sonsona, and some of the time that was a Kanga Yala Gordo. Or till do not call soda. Mikbalia such a talk comes you the carry and Moshi own a shagra, she named Mikba own a shagra, Chidan carry comna de Giora, so carry comna de Giora. Diana Nambata Jena, Then Cheda Tubashiko, Sanjay Ku commander of Tibeta, and then Mida Tonga commander of Suscade, Davina, the commander de Ordo. Mikbala, Titi Comne, Tatil Mambushe Ordo, and Namsan Compata, some teacher to take a neg mardo, Yantas and Nazo, some Salatos in Negra, Tea Ring Tangore. Some Rajitana told the same take al Tegdua, Yashandan Roshadua. That is ring time, take a little ring down. Take Tapsitalia, and it's pa you do the Yansuku, and the chair, come this chair. Come the leg, Mato Tambun, and some time to take on some hanging at the edge on Gumarto. Or take the Zanko Chinguinity, Gagredua. Cabasidu Chakbash and Judges are you up in the Legacia, Chichi with some Webble Pando, the Cabasidua. Mangshava de Shinjaki on Gora Chakbe, you to sustain your no. Tipa Tontoadilla, Mibole, Comje Utile Shandupa, Tontoadilla, Cabasidua. Chimasiduzanko, Migbe Uti, Dambos and Masumbache, Dozma, and the sugar to learn to do. Any new cook, a little Lizapa, Niku Yasan Dugara. Simple Comje Uti, Lagwe Povan Juvenes, Dambos and Sugra. Tambu Majun and the Makalikin, some Masai and Yagayora. Sandu, the poverty, which is some Yawusin Yawara, Tinesi. Migba the Shuk Sambo of the Zenguyara. Shoot the man Lersona. She shot the best on the show man Lerson, and any queers and Dores. Chiman said Yungora. Chiman said to the Sema, Lur, make by the short, Ni queers are Malay Sidua. Or till her Chiman Sigora. See the Quebas, the Yansem Tungan. Shandal ba kasakal drote estoa tini de ken sheshere chimanda ko ba segdoa ta tini shive tabshi karcha urasada chambada shishi de chambada shishi chita mikba de transe de agora so kar kongo ne te ya chambana yude shogro ya de so ya sha se tangura mado tambo ne transe de ro chig maro ani pa ko be wan de roso ne ya tan namsa ko be wan de do ase Shishindi Sobatsuradilla. Send the Tata Degan Tegdo Tegmo, the Shishin Sidua. Somebody she Tata Degdo Degmo to Tanget Shishin Sigara. And of course, so come there, Shandan Rosan, or Diane Shandan to do Chikdosam. Chunda Madoka and Kutunga and Rosana Jogwa Hakwasha or sometimes using Butte to the Comjagus, some Shada Kodera, or Tangaya, some toilet, say Yatsu Kudiga Shawara. Yantiga Susha, Tendese, Shishindiga Hakwa Chora, Shishindiga Hamagona, and Nico Diane Dawson, some Shanda Tanzi Tegra, Shishindiga Tatan that take Kumgia, Chess, Part left Sato and Namsatsu, Gurua, Drudo Tata Degdo Degmut Tavura, Shishindiga. Trambadiga Meba de so Shiban and Tanchogura, Marshal Jatsu Tamba Chigura, Tamba de Shishin. Tini Geshe Yeshe Su Shukja Su Tangu Yara, Shumaja Jaman Lushan and Chimanandore. Cake the Lia Chimada Kuba Nire. Till the Tado Chinga de la Tamba de Shishin Nire. Tamba Nisha Sudangazo. Sosuchik Tan, Tigan any sort of some de Pashago Yara. Tanina Madrocho, Tamba de Sudusin against the Tambana. And taken the Pasam de Pashago Yara, Tan, the do thing Yara. Any pass duet, Mama duets, and the thing it thought in Getalia, Shishin de Shishin de Sobak Sota, Tata Shido Sigmodo. Or take a do in a Tinder Corsora, Lambal Dudu in a Langan do some, Motatandu in a Motatangu, some Tamba de Cora, Motatandu Tamba de Chase and something Golo Chigreto. The Tamba de Shishin Kadu in a Cora. Dudu and Dugu, some Guru and Doanalia. And me to Pazo Taco to stay, and then I'm going to do you some order. Teach and any some comdora, talk about it so some times I take on the thought that day together. Or the Alici Lamna Mountas. Yeah.
So here, then, when we get to the kind of actual session, then the practice of serenity comes first. So the serenity should be achieved first. So when we are getting into the actual session of sitting down to meditate, we should first be working on our serenity. And so here, the two syllables that make up this term in Tibetan, the first has this sense of like pacifying, and the second is abiding. So the pacification is really pacifying all of our distractions, all of the places that our mind might go, in order to be able to stay focused stably on one object. So whether this is an object like the body of the Buddha, imagining the body of the Buddha and focusing on that object, we would then, as we're meditating on it, try to bring our mind back again and again in order to remain with this kind of stability and clarity on the object of our focus. And so whether this is something like just imagining the body of a Buddha, or thinking about love and compassion and impermanence or emptiness, or all of these kinds of topics that we may then take up as a topic of meditation, when one is engaging in serenity, this has the quality of being able to remain focused single-pointedly on that object with a great deal of clarity that brings forth a kind of bliss and pliancy of body and mind. So serenity, just describing the nature of it, is that mind which has overcome distraction to external objects and which spontaneously and continuously turn towards the object of meditation with bliss and pliancy. When one has achieved this level of serenity, it is like a sort of this blissful thing to continue to turn back toward the object of our meditation. So here, when it comes then to the kind of object that one takes as an object of meditation, one could really take anything as the object of meditation. But here, when one is engaging in a kind of Buddhist practice, we are going to focus on an object that is virtuous. So again, something like the body of the Buddha, we then take that kind of object and we notice that our mind, say, we're naturally able to remain focused on something for a little while, but we have to bring our mind back to that object again and again. This is a process of lengthening our ability to remain stable and clearly focused on a particular object. And the main kind of obstacles to being able to do this are laxity and excitement. So excitement is this kind of quality of mind. It's sort of like a wildness of mind that's really mostly of a desire or attachment kind of nature. We get distracted away. We're thinking about our jobs or things that we want or things that we need to do. And that kind of pulls the mind from the object of meditation. So excitement is an impediment to our having this kind of serenity meditation. And we also need to deal with the fault of laxity. Laxity is like drifting towards sleep almost, where there's some sort of stability to the mind, but there's a lack of clarity. We're getting too loose in our holding with our awareness. Like if we are holding on to a bowl, say, and we want to carry it somewhere, if our grip gets too loose, we're going to drop that completely. And if we're sort of holding on to it too tight, that's not really great either. But here, it's like if we're holding the object of meditation too loosely and we fall into this laxity, it's like dropping that bowl. It's like not having the right level of grip on that. And so here, the method for dealing with these kinds of faults is using mindfulness and introspection. So mindful, again, these are qualities that we develop. We don't have them immediately, but we develop them over time. So mindfulness is that kind of awareness of the object. We have placed our minds onto something and we try to be holding on to that object. And then we need to use introspection, which is like a little spy in our mind to see, are we focusing on that object or not? Have we lost that object or not? So we need mindfulness that sort of brings up the object of our meditation and holds it. And then we need this kind of factor of introspection in order to become aware when we have, say, our mind has gotten distracted away? Are we still focusing on that object? So here we can see that when we are trying to meditate, sometimes we might hold the object with mindfulness initially, but then become distracted away. Our attention has wandered off somewhere else. And if we don't have introspection, we may spend a great deal of time just sort of meditating, but our mind is actually wandering off here and there, and we're just not aware of it. So again, we need the kind of mindfulness that's holding that object. And when mindfulness loses its object, we need to have the awareness, this introspection, which is like our little mental spy, to be able to say, oh, I've lost the attention. I've gone from what I was intending to be doing.
Oh yeah. Da de tanda kar shine ngo shewi wa ngajo. Oh tena tola tomar shine trubar cha de se. Chiru ji yu la number yen wa shine se do. Shiwa ne so ra shine se. Ti chane de nando mekba la kyundu range ngange jukba jugla se. Ni kawada tende kom chang ne. Ane paruchilia ko semde mekbale ba chuto chido namsa hako gyora tocho gyomar gyor ane paruchil su chuto chido ne hako gyora sem chilo chuto chido hako ane techo gora. Ne maa chingma de tambo to wata pe chingni ya nyi kuto che ya shine te kan sha tende che wata paruchilia ane chingma yondo chido namsa hako gyora ane sem de kan che chido teto gyora lusim. Di dewa le tene ni lu Xinjiang ke dewa da sem Xinjiang ke dewa se lu le kale che me ba sem le kale che me ba ka je kom jam ne dewe na wa ma do ji kale kana chi ma de den de che yong ji me ba de lu sim Xinjiang ke dewe sim be ko ne se do rang me ba lam be me lu du ju be ting ji de le shine se go ra dang bu kum du shine kum gu yo ma do shine ngone ma de ting ji shine ngone ye na kom ne ni mikbalo be che do kaje te chuchu chingi sum shi kaje te ne te thumge ene te ba lu da sem ge Xinjiang ge te sem be ko ne pe te la chen de ma do ji ma de ji so bu ma de sem ma de te che yong gi ma be cha go ne lu da sem Xinjiang ge te lu sem Xinjiang ge te sem be ko ne ene rang ge mikba tu le chi do do kaje ba do te sam na chuchu chingi sum kaje te sam ne te tom getelia ni shine se o titing ji de la shine se ora o ti ngo de chiglam na ya.
So here again, describing the kind of nature, the essence of serenity meditation, it says serenity is that mind which has overcome distraction to external objects. So there has gotten rid of the sort of excitement and which spontaneously and continuously turns toward the object of meditation with bliss and pliancy. So there are the kind of having pacified those distractions to external objects and having the ability to remain stably focused with this kind of bliss and pliancy. So here, this is something that we develop over time. And once we train and train and train our minds, we're able to get to a point where when we place our minds on an object, we don't immediately lose that. We aren't immediately distracted away. When we're able to do that for a longer and longer period of time. And so over time, we're able to investigate and make sure that we don't have any laxity or excitement, and eventually get to this point where we develop the kind of bliss and pliancy of body and mind that is that comes about through this kind of serenity meditation, wherein we are able to remain for as long as we want on a particular object without any sort of difficulty. There's no discomfort or unpleasantness of body or mind once one has attained this level of calm abiding or serenity meditation. And so as we talk about with the kind of a way in which a Buddha engages or someone who has attained this level of meditation, spontaneously and effortlessly able to place the mind in this kind of meditative stabilization on a desired object without experiencing any sort of difficulty, discomfort of body and mind, this allows us to remain in meditation for however long we might want, whether it's hours, 2 or 3 or 4 hours. So it is this kind of state that one achieves when one achieves serenity.
Oh yeah, that's shine top sasun ne laudon chugyora. Laudon delia ko dandanga ju dandam to be tongban ye to be laudon shek tera. Chida kunjublo la mikbe laudon yore do. Mita ba da tungya da sosu sopo da kado da yibda dendele mini shine da laudon yiga yo chogyora. Dandanga ju de she de dandam ji danda ya tongi to be laudon de she yore ma do. Chida laudon ya kunjublo mikbe laudon yore. Dandang mikbe laudon yore yiga yore. Oh, this is Uncle Hardon Singade, Shinegi, some Miguel Checho Nation Bangane, Yacheba Chiguare. Tayu Miller Soba, Tayu Mikola Sim Nation, and it are when you Mayola Soba Cheba Chetisha. And this Miguel Checho Nation Bangane Cheba Chena, Simpazo, Shandan Madroja, she done the coach Cheba Chenet to Guyana. Shinegi ngane rangi mikbali ya cheba chetop jitrambe lusim shinjang tewe sinsigra ya sem chechu do nebe yina ya tito ne cheba chene tambu to ko cheba chedu ya chechu do ne toguma do da shine top chani ya chang du se chang du sa chechu do nebe to ne cheba chetu gora chesa cheba cheche nis ta yue me cheba che ya ta mebe kala sha ya ta yue me cheba che ya ta mebe kala sha sem sha tende chen Lagdon said, Shinejing ane, Rangi Mikbalia, Cheba Chetu Jitrambe, Lusim Shinjang Gitewe Simbe, Nishirap Telia, and Lagdon Sigdua. Tele Kunzula Mikbada, Tondon Mibaniga Yochora. O Tindico Shineda Laton Yeti, Chiribada Nambe Timure. Shineda Laton Sero, and someday Tambu, Niba, Sumba, Shiba, Namgata, Namsheta, Messi, Stingy Temo Mambu. There's a ganga chiribala yore, Nambala yore, you got to more. Oh, Tene Shine troops are soon and mercy said of tender to be also. There's a tumor. That time maybe Tombani talk by Shineta Cloudon combat chiribal yo mardo. Yeah, what did you do? Any dressing said to just also, yeah.
So here then it says that which properly examines suchness from within a state of serenity is insight. So once one has developed this kind of insight, one is then able to use this kind of, or sorry, once one has developed serenity, one then engages in a kind of development of insight within that state of serenity. So here, when we talk about serenity and insight, there is insight observing conventional phenomena. There's insight that can look into the various sorts of qualities of any kinds of things. So there is a particular kind of insight that we are seeking to develop here, which is the insight or the wisdom realizing emptiness. And when one engages within the context of serenity, this kind of investigation, whether there is, say, a self, and does that self exist from its own side? And so initially, when one is investigating those types of topics without serenity, you don't have the sort of power that comes from that mental stability. But when one has achieved serenity and the sort of mental and physical bliss and pliancy that come with that, one then engages in investigation and analysis, and such wisdom is able to actually bring forth even further mental bliss and pliancy. And so we have in this context the wisdom that is observing emptiness, but there are other types of insight or wisdom that one could develop. So this idea of serenity conjoined with insight can be common to Buddhists and non-Buddhists. There are non-Buddhists that are achieving certain types of a union of serenity and insight that leads to, say, the actual meditative concentrations in the form and the formless realms, all the way through sort of like limitless space and limitless consciousness, nothingness in the peak of samsara, and so forth. Those are achieved through a unity of serenity and insight that is common to Buddhists and non-Buddhists. But here we're speaking specifically about the kind of insight that is examining suchness, or is examining emptiness. And this is what one is striving to develop as a Buddhist. So we'll stop there for today, as I believe that the time is up for today.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for your precious teachings, Geshe. And thank you, Katrina. Our next teaching is Saturday, March 5th at 8:30 Pacific time. And since Losar will happen between now and then, we wish Geshe a very happy Losar, and Katrina, you as well, and all the participants online. And now we'll conclude with some dedication prayers.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losong's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayame. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzing Gyatso Chenrezi, may you stay until samsara ends.
Oh, yeah.
So, Jema Jaya, Ani Losar la tashi dele. Oh, he went away.
We'll say goodbye to Geshe Thabkhe and Katrina. And just to summarize the announcement that we made last week, during the 15 days of miracles that begins with Losar, our merit is multiplied. And so we'd like to make a very nice offering to Geshe Thabkhe and Katrina. And so those of you online, if you'd like to participate with us, you can go to the website and donate there, or send us a check by the 18th. And please be sure to tell us how you'd like your donation divided between Geshe and Katrina, our interpreter, and the Abbey, and any wishes that you'd like us to pass along. Okay, we'll see you next week. Thank you.